A historic agreement was reached today at the United Nations Biodiversity Conference in Canada that aims to increase protections for the world's lands and oceans. As William Brangham reports, it comes as the planet continues to experience a staggering decline in biodiversity, driven in large part by human behavior.
Judy, roughly 200 countries agreed today to a set of measures that try to protect and restore the vulnerable habitats that are central to life on Earth. Under the agreement, by 2030, world nations have pledged to protect 30% of the land and water considered vital for biodiversity. They'll offer some $200 billion per year to help fund these initiatives, and wealthier nations will pay $30 billion annually to developing nations. Like many of these agreements, these are not legally binding. So how effective will this be in saving species that are at risk and protecting our lands and our waters? For one take on the agreement, I'm joined by Collin O'Mara. He's president and CEO of the National Wildlife Federation. Collin O'Mara, thank you so much for being here. Before we get to this agreement, I wonder if you could help explain the extinction and biodiversity crisis that we're facing and why that matters.
And right now, William, there's almost a million species around the globe that we think are at heightened risk of extinction. We're seeing an acceleration of the rapid decline of species populations. There's 70% less wildlife than there was, 40 years ago. About one third of all species just in the U.S. alone are at heightened risk of extinction. And why we should care is like it's small species like pollinators, like native bees and monarch butterflies, that are down 50%, 90% in some cases. That's the way we feed ourselves. There's the habitats that support these species provide flood abatement in terms of wetlands or forests that keep us safe. So there it's kind of like the canary in the coal mine. And I often say that when you save wildlife, we save ourselves because our future is so well linked to having healthy wildlife populations across the board.
And what are the principal drivers of those losses?
I mean, the biggest one is really habitat loss. I mean, we have decimated, forests around the globe. We have destroyed and kind of a lot of wetland capacity. You think about our grasslands, you think about kind of the near ocean environment, and so that level of degradation it's a death sentence for a lot of species. And these species are resilient, but they still need a place to roam. So habitat kind of destruction and fragmentation is a big one. Another one is disease. We're seeing more and more kind of wildlife diseases, and obviously there's a human touch to that with some of the zoonotic diseases we're seeing around the globe. There's issues with invasive species that come into a different landscape. All of a sudden, don't have natural predators. All of a sudden, they cause challenges. There's new forms of pollution, and climate change kind of accelerates all of that. So it's kind of the perfect storm for this kind of mass extinction that we're seeing rapidly accelerate.
Right, lots of human fingerprints on this crisis as well. So this 200 or so countries come together and say, okay, we are going to pledge going forward that we're going to try to protect 30% of the oceans and the lands. What do you make of this agreement?
I mean, look, it's a huge step, right? To have the nations of the world come together to talk about the importance of biodiversity, during a time of war abroad, during a time of, kind of global economic challenges and a pandemic. And so this is a big priority, is a huge deal. And at the same time, it's not enough, right? I mean, look, this is a commitment that 100 countries had made before they got to Montreal for the meeting. President Biden already signed an executive order in his first couple weeks in office, making this commitment. And now the key for all of us is making sure that those commitments on the page become real progress on the ground.
I mean, as we saw with the COP and climate agreements, money is always a big hang up on these. I mean, we know that there are nations all over the world that depend on the logging and the fishing, both to feed their people, but also which exacerbate and feed this crisis. Do you think that the money that has been pledged so far is up to the task at hand?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge first step, right? So having a $200 billion commitment, annually, by 2030 is a huge deal. The 20 to 30 billion that like some of the more developed economies are proposing for some of the lower income communities is a big deal, but it's not nearly enough. I mean, studies have shown, we need 700 billion to 880 billion dollars of investment a year. I mean, I'm in DC last couple of weeks trying to advocate for more U.S. spending, which I think would make a big deal. It would help us go a long way. And so, again, it's a huge first step, but those commitments have to be real. And we have seen in the past in some of the climate agreements, those financial commitments not really materialize after people leave the conference. And so, making sure that they're real is going to be really what makes or breaks whether this is going to be a successful meeting.
Right. I mean, to that exact point, the cold water to throw on this is that the last major UN agreement on biodiversity was, by most accounts, a bit of a bust. And this current agreement, there are no binding mechanisms in here. So, I mean, do you worry that there are instances where countries are paying lip service to this but won't actually follow through with substantive action?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a little bit of a kind of a prisoner's dilemma problem, right? Where like, everyone's kind of assuming somebody else is going to act. And I do think that, the commitments are real. I mean, the fact that we had, a lot of, senior leaders from different governments come in, but at the same time, we've seen, pledges that have fallen off the plate when leadership has changed in different countries. We've seen that in our country, of course. And so, I really think it's going to be important upon citizens and your viewers and NGOs to really make sure these commitments become real because, the track record isn't great, but this is really our last best shot to try to save the full diversity of wildlife around the globe. And if we don't act with kind of urgency, we're going to miss that because the greatest ally of extinction at this point is inaction.
The United States is just one of two nations that is not a signatory to the UN Biodiversity Convention, which is the convention that covers this agreement. Do you think that that harms our ability to both cajole other nations to act and our ability to act in and of ourselves?
I do, William. I mean, I think it's key to be at the table. I mean, it's one thing to be an observer. We can do a lot of things that are important in DC, but at the end of the day, there's nothing like American leadership, and that comes from being a full-blown participant. So I'm hoping this is something we can sign in the years ahead and be a full-blown participant in the future.
All right, Collin O'Mara of the National Wildlife Federation, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, William.